The ring slipped from Zelda Owens' trembling fingers twice before she finally managed to place it on the pawnbroker's counter, her stomach hollow with hunger and shame. The tiny gold band with its modest pearl had been her mother's most prized possession, worn thin from decades of hard work and harder love. And now here it sat under the harsh afternoon light, streaming through the dusty window of Thompson's General Store and Pawn in Medicine Bow, Wyoming. It was September 1883, and Zelda had not eaten a proper meal in 4 days. $10, Mr. Thompson said without looking up from his ledger, his wire spectacles perched on his bulbous nose. He did not even bother to examine the ring closely. "Sir, it is worth at least 20, Zelda said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The pearl is real, and my father saved for months to buy it for my mother before they married." "Then perhaps your father should have saved enough to keep his daughter fed," Thompson replied with the casual cruelty of a man who had grown fat on other people's desperation. $10. Take it or leave it." Zelda's hand moved to cover the ring protectively, her heart screaming at her to snatch it back and run from this place. But her body knew better. $10 would buy beans, flour, maybe some salt pork. $10 meant she would not have to feel this gnawing emptiness for another week. Her father had been dead 3 years, buried after a mining accident in the silver claims north of town. Her mother had followed him 6 months later, her heart simply giving out from grief and exhaustion. At 22 years old, Zelda found herself alone in a world that had no patience for women without family or fortune. "I will take it," she whispered. The bell above the door chimed, and a man walked into the shop with the kind of presence that made everyone take notice. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of years of hard ranch work. His hat was dusty from the trail, his boots worn but well-maintained, and his face had that weathered handsomeness that came from spending most of his life under the Wyoming sky. He could not have been much older than 30, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of sage in summer. "Afternoon, Thompson," the man said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to fill the small shop. Then his gaze landed on Zelda, and something in his expression shifted, softened. She must have looked a sight, she knew, with her dress mended in a dozen places and her face too thin, her cheekbones standing out sharp beneath skin that had once been smooth and healthy. "Mr. Dalton," Thompson said, his tone considerably more respectful than the one he had used with Zelda. "What can I do for you today?" The man called Dalton was still looking at Zelda, his eyes moving from her face to the ring on the counter, then back again. "Is that ring for sale?" he asked. "Just came in," Thompson said eagerly. $12 and it is yours." Zelda's head snapped toward the pawnbroker. "You just said 10. Thompson's face flushed an ugly purple. "The price to sell is always higher than the price to buy. That is how business works, girl." "That is how robbery works," the cowboy said quietly, but there was steel beneath the softness of his words. He pulled a leather wallet from his vest pocket and counted out bills onto the counter. $20. That is what you said it was worth, was it not, miss? Zelda stared at him, unable to form words. $20 was more money than she had seen in months. But the ring, her mother's ring, would still be gone. "Mr. Dalton, I already agreed to a price with the young lady," Thompson protested weakly. "And now I am making you a better offer," the cowboy replied. He pushed the money across the counter and picked up the ring, then turned to Zelda. His eyes were kind, she noticed, despite the hardness that life had carved into the rest of him. "This belonged to your mother." "Yes," she managed. "Then you should not have to sell it." He held the ring out to her. "Take it back." "I cannot," Zelda said, even as her hand ached to reach for it. "I have no money to pay you." I am not asking for payment." When she did not move, he reached for her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against her cold skin, and pressed the ring into her palm. Some things should not be lost out of desperation. "I do not understand," Zelda said, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall in front of strangers. "Why would you do this?" The cowboy smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Because I remember what it is like to be hungry, and because nobody should have to sell their mother's memory to survive." He tipped his hat to her. "Benjamin Dalton, miss. I run the Double D Ranch about 10 miles north of town." "Zelda Owens," she replied automatically. "Miss Owens, when was the last time you had a proper meal?" The directness of the question caught her off guard, and before she could think to lie, the truth spilled out. "Sunday last." 5 days ago, she realized with a sick jolt. Not 4 days. 5. Something flickered in Benjamin Dalton's eyes, a tightening around his mouth that suggested anger carefully controlled. "Thompson, I need supplies loaded onto my wagon. 100 pounds of flour, 50 pounds of beans, 20 pounds of salt pork, 10 pounds of sugar, 5 pounds of coffee, a slab of bacon, a dozen eggs if you have them fresh, some dried fruit, rice, oats, lard, and whatever vegetables you have that are not half rotten." He paused. "And add a good roasting chicken." "Mr. Dalton, that is a considerable order," Thompson said, no doubt calculating his profit. "Then you had better get started. I want everything ready in an hour." Benjamin turned back to Zelda. "Where do you live, Miss Owens?" "I cannot accept charity," Zelda said, though her stomach cramped at the thought of refusing. "You have already done too much." "It is not charity. I need someone to help with ranch accounts and correspondence. My foreman can manage the cattle and the men, but neither of us has much skill with figures and writing. The last time I tried to do the books, I somehow ended up owing myself $300. He said it with such easy humor that Zelda almost smiled despite herself. "I will pay fair wages, and you can take meals with us until you are back on your feet. If you are willing to work, that is." It was a kindness disguised as business, and they both knew it. A proper woman would refuse, would insist on maintaining her dignity. But Zelda had learned over the past 6 months that dignity did not fill an empty stomach or keep the cold away at night. And there was something in Benjamin Dalton's eyes that made her want to trust him, a fundamental decency that seemed as much a part of him as his strong hands or his sun-weathered face. "I can read and write well," she said carefully. "My father believed in education for girls as well as boys. And I know figures. I kept the household accounts for my parents. Then you are hired." He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she shook it. His grip was firm but gentle, and he held her hand just a moment longer than necessary, as if trying to communicate something beyond words. "We will load these supplies and take them to your place first, then you can gather whatever things you need. I have a small cabin on the ranch property that was meant for a foreman's family, but my foreman prefers the bunkhouse. You can stay there. It is nothing fancy, but it is clean and sound." "Mr. Dalton, I do not know what to say. Say you will do honest work for honest pay, and that will be enough." He released her hand and turned to Thompson, who was watching the exchange with poorly disguised curiosity. "Well, do not just stand there. Get moving on that order." While Thompson bustled around gathering supplies, Benjamin stepped outside, gesturing for Zelda to follow. His wagon stood at the hitching rail, a sturdy vehicle pulled by 2 strong horses. "I come into town once a month for supplies," he explained. "I had not planned on buying this much today, but then I had not planned on meeting anyone who needed it more than I do." "You do not even know me," Zelda said. "How do you know I am not a thief or a liar, are you?" "No." "Then that is all I need to know." He leaned against the wagon, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow was not. Medicine Bow is not a large town, Miss Owens. I know who you are. I know your father died in the collapse at the Morrison claim, and that your mother passed shortly after. I know you have been trying to survive alone in that little house on the east side of town, taking in mending and washing when you can find it. What I did not know until today was that you were struggling this badly, or I would have come sooner. Why? The question burst from her. Why would you care about a stranger? Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. 5 years ago, I was working a ranch down in Colorado. The owner was a cruel man who paid us barely enough to survive and worked us near to death. I got sick, pneumonia, and he turned me out because I could not work. I would have died if a woman in town had not taken me in, fed me, nursed me back to health. She did not know me. She had no reason to help, but she did anyway. He met Zelda's eyes again. She told me that kindness is not something you do because you expect a return. You do it because you can, and because the world is a hard enough place without making it harder. When I left Colorado and came up here to Wyoming, when I worked my way from ranch hand to foreman to finally buying my own land, I promised myself I would pay that kindness forward however I could. Zelda felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been carrying so long she had forgotten it was there. What was her name, the woman who helped you? Eleanor Pritchard. She died 2 years ago. I sent money to help with her burial, but I never got to thank her properly. He straightened up as Thompson appeared in the doorway, struggling with a sack of flour. Looks like our supplies are coming. Where do you live, Miss Owens? The small house past the church with the blue door, she said. But Mr. Dalton, I insist on paying you back for all of this. I will keep account of every penny. If it makes you feel better, but I am in no hurry for repayment. Consider it an advance on your wages. He moved to help Thompson load the supplies, his movements efficient and practiced. Watching him work, Zelda felt a strange flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. The house with the blue door was more of a shack, Benjamin realized as they pulled up in front of it. The paint was peeling, one of the front steps had rotted through, and the roof looked like it might not survive another hard winter. He kept his expression neutral as he helped Zelda down from the wagon, but inside he was calculating what it would take to make this place livable. Too much, probably, for a structure this old and worn. Inside was even worse. The main room held a small table with one chair, a narrow bed in the corner with blankets so thin he could see through them, and a stove that looked like it had not been lit in weeks. There was no food anywhere that he could see, not even a crust of bread. The pantry cupboard stood open and completely empty. I sold most of the furniture to buy food over the summer, Zelda said quietly, her face flushed with embarrassment. And I have been trying to save on firewood. Benjamin set down the first sack of flour, then went back for another load. He made trip after trip until the wagon was empty and Zelda's tiny pantry was full to bursting. She stood in the middle of the room, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Miss Owens, he said gently. I am sorry, she gasped. I do not mean to cry. It is just that I have been so hungry and so scared, and I did not know what I was going to do. She wiped at her face with shaking hands. You cannot know what it is like to go to bed every night wondering if tomorrow will be the day you finally have nothing left. Light that stove, Benjamin said. I am going to cook you something to eat before we go anywhere. You do not have to do that. I know I do not have to. I want to. He was already moving toward the stove, opening it up to check the flue. Do you have firewood? A little out back. He found the woodpile, which was pathetically small, and brought in enough to get a good fire going. While the stove heated, he sliced bacon into a pan and set it to sizzling, then cracked 4 eggs into the rendered fat. The smell of cooking food filled the small house, and he heard Zelda make a small sound behind him, half sigh and half sob. "Sit down," he said without turning around. "When was the last time you sat down without worrying about where your next meal was coming from?" "I cannot remember," she admitted. He plated the eggs and bacon, added 2 thick slices of bread with butter and set it in front of her. "Eat slowly. Your stomach is not used to rich food right now." Zelda stared at the plate as if it might vanish if she looked away, then picked up her fork with trembling hands. She took a small bite, chewed carefully, swallowed. Then another bite. Benjamin watched her eat, feeling a fierce protectiveness rise in his chest that he had no right to feel for a woman he had met less than 2 hours ago. But there was something about Zelda Owens that called to him. Maybe it was the way she held onto her dignity, even in the face of crushing poverty. Maybe it was the strength he saw in her, the determination that had kept her going when a weaker person would have given up. Or maybe it was simply the way she looked at him, like he was something more than just a rancher with money to spare. "This is the best food I have ever tasted," she said, and he could hear that she meant it. "It is just eggs and bacon. It is everything." She set down her fork, her plate half empty. "I cannot eat any more right now, but I do not want to waste it. Save it for later. You will be hungry again in a few hours." He sat down across from her at the small table. "Miss Owens, I want you to understand something. This job offer is genuine. I truly do need help with the ranch accounts and correspondence. But more than that, I need you to know that you are safe with me. I will not take advantage of you or expect anything improper. You will have your own cabin, your own space. If any of the ranch hands bothers you, you tell me and I will deal with it immediately. And if at any point you want to leave, I will pay you what you are owed and help you get wherever you want to go." Zelda met his eyes steadily. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because someone was kind to me once and it saved my life." He stood up. "Now, pack whatever you want to bring. We should get to the ranch before dark." She did not have much to pack. A few dresses, all as worn and mended as the one she wore, a hairbrush that had been her mother's, a small Bible with her family's names written inside the front cover, a tintype photograph of a stern-looking couple that must have been her parents. She wrapped everything in a shawl and tied it into a bundle, then stood in the middle of the room looking lost. "The ring," Benjamin said. "Do not forget your mother's ring." She had placed it on the windowsill, and now she picked it up and slipped it onto the 4th finger of her right hand. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "I will never sell it again," she said fiercely. "No matter what happens." "You will not have to," Benjamin promised. The ride to the Double D Ranch took them north out of Medicine Bow, following the Platte River through country that was beautiful in its harsh way. The September afternoon was warm, the sky that particular shade of blue that only seemed to exist in Wyoming. Zelda sat beside Benjamin on the wagon seat, her bundle on her lap, and felt as if she was waking from a long nightmare. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, wanting to hear his voice, wanting to learn about this man who had changed her life in the space of an afternoon. "I bought the land 4 years ago," Benjamin said, clearly pleased to have something to talk about. "It was nothing then, just open range and a half-collapsed barn. I built the main house myself, with help from the men I hired. We started with 100 head of cattle and built from there. Now we are up to 600 head, with plans to expand. It is not the biggest ranch in Wyoming, but it is mine, every acre of it. That must feel good, to own something that is truly yours." "It does. My father was a tenant farmer in Missouri. He worked himself into an early grave on land that would never belong to him. I swore I would not end up the same way." He glanced at her. "What about you? What did you dream about before your parents died?" "I dreamed about being a teacher," Zelda said softly. I wanted to open a school for girls, teach them not just reading and arithmetic, but also history and science and literature. My father used to say that education was the key to freedom, especially for women. She smiled sadly. But those dreams seem very far away now. Maybe not as far as you think. The world is changing, even out here. More women are going to college, starting businesses, making their own way. Who is to say you cannot do the same? A woman with no money and no family has very limited options, Mr. Dalton. But you have work now and a safe place to live. That is a start. He turned the wagon onto a smaller trail that wound through a grove of cottonwoods. And please call me Benjamin. We are going to be working together after all. Then you must call me Zelda. Zelda, he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. It is unusual, pretty. She felt her face warm. It was my grandmother's name. She was Greek, came to America as a young woman. A Greek grandmother and dreams of teaching. You are more interesting than you let on, Zelda Owens. They crested a small rise, and there was the Double D Ranch spread out below them. The main house was large and well built, painted white with a broad front porch. Behind it stood a barn that looked new, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, several corrals, and off to one side, a smaller cabin with a stone chimney. Everything was neat and well maintained, speaking to the care Benjamin took with his property. It is beautiful, Zelda breathed. It is home, Benjamin said simply. The cabin there on the left, that is where you will stay. Like I said, it is nothing fancy, but it should be comfortable. He drove the wagon directly to the cabin and helped her down. Inside, she found a single large room with a real bed covered in a colorful quilt, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, and a small kitchen area with a good stove. Curtains hung at the windows, and someone had left wildflowers in a jar on the table. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, she comes from medicine both 3 days a week to cook and clean, Benjamin explained. I sent word ahead that someone would be staying here. The flowers were her idea. It is wonderful, Zelda said, running her hand over the back of the rocking chair. I cannot believe this is all for me. You will earn it, do not worry. I have 6 months of accounts that need sorting, and I get correspondence from buyers and banks that I barely understand. You will have plenty to keep you busy. He set her bundle on the table. Get settled in. Rest if you need to. Come up to the main house for supper around 6. Mrs. Chen will have cooked enough for an army as usual. Benjamin, Zelda said, stopping him before he could leave. Thank you for everything. I do not know how I can ever repay you. He smiled, and again she was struck by how it transformed his face. Just get well, Zelda. That will be payment enough. After he left, Zelda sat in the rocking chair and wept, but this time they were tears of relief rather than despair. She had been so close to the edge, so terribly close to losing everything, including hope itself. And then Benjamin Dalton had walked into Thompson's shop at exactly the right moment, as if sent by Providence. She thought about his hands pressing the ring back into her palm, the way he had looked at her with such kindness and respect. She thought about how he had cooked for her in her own miserable kitchen, making sure she ate before worrying about anything else. She thought about the way he spoke about his dreams for the ranch, the pride in his voice unmixed with arrogance. Benjamin Dalton was a good man. More than that, he was the kind of man she had thought existed only in the stories her mother used to tell, tales of knights and heroes who rescued maidens in distress. Except, Zelda did not want to be a maiden in distress. She wanted to be someone useful, someone strong, someone worthy of the second chance she had been given. She explored the cabin, finding dishes in the cupboard, linens in a chest, even a few books on a shelf. Someone had stocked the small pantry with basics, and there was firewood neatly stacked by the hearth. Every detail spoke of thought and care, and Zelda felt her heart swell with an emotion she was not quite ready to name. At 6 o'clock, she walked up to the main house, her hair brushed and pinned as neatly as she could manage, her best dress only slightly less mended than the others. Benjamin answered the door himself, and she saw that he had cleaned up as well, his hair damp from washing and his shirt fresh. "Come in," he said warmly. "I hope you are hungry." Mrs. Chen was very excited to hear we would have a guest and went a bit overboard. The dining room table was indeed loaded with food: roast beef, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread, butter, and a pie that smelled of apples and cinnamon. A Chinese woman in her 50s bustled out of the kitchen, her face breaking into a wide smile when she saw Zelda. "You must be Miss Owens," she said, her English accented but clear. "Mr. Dalton told me you would be helping with the ranch business. I am so pleased. He works too hard, this one, and never takes care of the paperwork properly." "I am happy to help," Zelda said, liking the woman instantly. "Sit, sit. You are too thin. We must feed you up." Mrs. Chen began piling food onto Zelda's plate despite her protests. "I will come to your cabin tomorrow and make sure you have everything you need. If you want anything special, you just tell me." Dinner was a lively affair, with Mrs. Chen chattering about the ranch, the other workers, and the gossip from town. Benjamin ate with the quiet contentment of a man satisfied with his life, occasionally interjecting with a comment or question. Zelda found herself relaxing, laughing at Mrs. Chen's stories, feeling almost normal for the first time in months. After dinner, Benjamin walked her back to the cabin through the gathering dusk. The air had cooled and the first stars were appearing overhead. Zelda wrapped her arms around herself, and without a word, Benjamin shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It smelled like him, like leather and sage and something uniquely masculine. "Tomorrow I will show you the accounts," he said as they reached her door. "Fair warning, they are a mess. I am much better with cattle than I am with numbers." "I am sure I can sort it out," Zelda said. She did not want to go inside yet, did not want this strange, wonderful day to end. "Benjamin, can I ask you something? Anything? Do you believe in fate? In things happening for a reason?" He considered the question seriously. "I believe that life gives us moments, opportunities. What we do with them, that is up to us. I could have walked past Thompson's shop today without going in. You could have refused my help, but we both made choices, and those choices brought us here." He looked down at her, his expression gentle in the starlight. "I am glad we made the choices we did." "So am I," Zelda whispered. For a moment they stood there, the night settling around them, and Zelda felt the air between them charge with something unspoken. Then Benjamin stepped back, breaking the spell. "Sleep well, Zelda. I will see you in the morning." She watched him walk back to the main house, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the darkness. Then she went inside, hung his jacket carefully over the back of the rocking chair, and lay down on the comfortable bed. For the first time in 6 months, she fell asleep without the gnawing ache of hunger, without the crushing weight of fear. She fell asleep feeling safe and feeling something else too, something warm and fragile and full of possibility. The next morning, Zelda woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and the smell of fresh coffee. She dressed quickly, pinned up her hair, and opened her door to find a tray on the porch with breakfast. Eggs, toast, jam, and a pot of coffee still steaming in the cool morning air. A note in rough handwriting read, "Thought you might want breakfast before starting work. The office is in the main house, first door on the right. Come whenever you are ready." She ate slowly, savoring every bite, still marveling at the change in her circumstances. Yesterday morning, she had been preparing to sell the last thing of value she owned. Today, She was eating a hot breakfast and preparing to start a job that offered both wages and dignity. It felt like a dream, one she was terrified of waking from. The office in the main house was small but well lit, with a large desk covered in papers, ledgers stacked haphazardly on shelves, and a filing cabinet that looked like it had never been properly organized. Benjamin was standing at the desk, frowning at a letter, when Zelda knocked on the open door. "Please tell me you can make sense of this," he said, holding up the paper. "It is from a bank in Cheyenne, and I think they are offering me a loan, but I cannot be certain. The language is so convoluted I need a translator." Zelda took the letter and read through it quickly. "They are offering you a loan at 8% interest for expansion purposes, with the ranch as collateral. But the terms are not particularly favorable. You could probably negotiate better, especially given your track record." Benjamin stared at her. "I have been puzzling over that letter for 3 days, and you understood it in 30 seconds. "I told you I was good with reading and figures," Zelda said, allowing herself a small smile. "Where would you like me to start?" They worked together all morning, Zelda sorting through the chaos of paperwork, while Benjamin explained the various aspects of ranch business. He was patient and thorough, never making her feel stupid for not understanding something about cattle or grazing rights or beef prices. In turn, she organized his correspondence, updated his accounts, and discovered that he was actually in much better financial shape than his messy record suggested. "You have been underpaying yourself," she said, frowning at the ledger. "You are taking a smaller share than you should be." "I like to make sure the men are paid well first," Benjamin said. "Happy workers are loyal workers." "That is admirable, but you also need to pay yourself fairly. You own this ranch. You took all the risk." She made some calculations. "If you adjust your own wages to a reasonable level and negotiate better terms on this loan, you could expand by another 200 head within the year and still maintain a comfortable operating margin." Benjamin leaned over her shoulder to look at the figures, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "How did you learn to do this?" "My father worked in the mines, but he wanted more for himself. He taught himself business principles, thinking he might one day start his own venture. He taught me everything he learned." She turned her head and found Benjamin's face very close to hers, his eyes intent. "He never got his chance, but at least his knowledge is proving useful." "More than useful," Benjamin said softly. "You are remarkable, Zelda." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I am just doing the job you hired me for." "No, you are doing far more than that." He straightened up, putting a respectable distance between them, but she could still feel the warmth of where he had been. "Let me show you the rest of the ranch. You should understand what all these numbers represent in practical terms." They spent the afternoon riding around the property, Benjamin on his big bay gelding and Zelda on a gentle mare named Buttercup. He showed her the grazing lands, the water sources, the boundaries of his property. He introduced her to his foreman, a grizzled man named Tom Martinez who had kind eyes and a firm handshake, and several of the ranch hands, all of whom treated her with respect tinged with curiosity. "The boss does not usually bring ladies around," Tom said with a grin. "Must be you are something special." "Miss Owens is helping with the accounts," Benjamin said firmly, but Zelda noticed the color rising in his neck. "Sure, boss. Whatever you say." Tom winked at Zelda and she had to suppress a smile. As they rode back toward the main house in the golden light of late afternoon, Benjamin said, "Tom is a good man, but he likes to meddle. Do not pay attention to his teasing." "I do not mind," Zelda said. "It is nice to be around people again. I have been so isolated these past months." "That must have been hard. Humans are not meant to be alone." "No, we are not," she glanced at him. What about you? Do you get lonely out here? Benjamin was quiet for a moment. Sometimes. I love the ranch, love the work, but at the end of the day it is just me and Mrs. Chen's leftovers. I always thought by now I would have a wife, maybe children. But I was so focused on building this place, I never took the time to look for someone to share it with. He smiled ruefully. Not that there are many single women in medicine, Bo, looking for a rancher with dirt under his fingernails and cow manure on his boots. I think you would be surprised, Zelda said quietly. Any woman would be lucky to have you. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt that charge between them again, stronger this time. Do you really think so? I know so. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, full of things neither of them was quite ready to say aloud. The days fell into a pattern. Zelda spent her mornings working on the ranch accounts, correspondence, and business matters. She discovered she had a talent for negotiation, drafting letters to buyers and banks that secured better prices and terms than Benjamin had been getting on his own. In the afternoons, she would ride out with Benjamin to check on the cattle, learning about ranch life and falling more in love with the wide Wyoming sky. Her body recovered quickly now that she had regular meals. Her face filled out, her skin regained its healthy color, and her eyes lost that haunted look. Mrs. Chen clucked over her approvingly and kept bringing dishes to her cabin, insisting that she needed to build up her strength. Tom and the other ranch hands treated her like a valued member of the team, seeking her advice on everything from equipment purchases to how to word a letter to a sweetheart back home. And through it all, she grew closer to Benjamin. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering shared loves of literature and music and open spaces. He told her about his childhood in Missouri, his father's struggles, his determination to make something of himself. She told him about her parents, their love for each other, the way her world had crumbled when they died. I felt so angry at them for leaving me, she confessed one evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I know it was not their fault, but I was so angry. And then I felt guilty for being angry, and it just ate at me until I could barely function. You were grieving, Benjamin said gently. There is no right way to do that. I should have been stronger. I should have been able to manage on my own. Why? Who says you should have to? He turned to face her. Zelda's strength is not about suffering alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is accept help when it is offered. Is that what you did when that woman in Colorado took you in, eventually? At first, I was too proud. I did not want to be a burden. But a leaner, she told me that pride is a cold companion when you are dying. She said that we all need help sometimes, and the trick is recognizing when and being brave enough to accept it. He smiled. She was a wise woman. I wish I could have met her. I would have liked to thank her for saving you. Why? The question was soft, but there was an intensity behind it. Zelda met his eyes. Because if she had not saved you, you would not have been in Thompson's shop that day, and I do not know what would have happened to me. I think you would have found a way to survive. You are stronger than you give yourself credit for. Maybe. But I am glad I did not have to find out. She stood up, suddenly needing to move, to do something with the nervous energy that always built up when Benjamin looked at her like that. I should get back to the cabin. I want to finish those projections for the spring cattle drive. Zelda, wait. Benjamin stood too, catching her hand before she could leave. There is something I need to say. Her heart hammered in her chest. What is it? I know you have only been here 3 weeks. I know it is probably too soon, and maybe I am crazy for even thinking this, but I cannot keep pretending. He held her hand between both of his touch warm and solid. I care about you, Zelda. More than I should, more than I meant to. When I see you smile, it is like the sun coming out. When you laugh, everything feels right with the world. And when I think about the future now, I cannot imagine it without you in it." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "Benjamin, I care about you too. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was just gratitude or circumstance, but it is more than that. You make me feel safe and valued and like I am more than just someone to be pitied." "I never pitied you," Benjamin said fiercely. "I admired you. Your strength, your determination, your refusal to give up even when everything was against you." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I am falling in love with you, Zelda Owens, and I know it is fast, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I had to tell you. I had to be honest." "It is fast," Zelda agreed, her voice shaking. "But sometimes fast does not mean wrong. Sometimes it just means right." She freed her hand from his and reached up to touch his face, feeling the rasp of stubble under her palm. "I am falling in love with you too, Benjamin Dalton. You saved my life in more ways than one, and somewhere along the way, you also stole my heart." Benjamin let out a breath that sounded like relief and joy mixed together. Then he pulled her close, one hand cupping the back of her head, the other wrapping around her waist. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Zelda breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first but quickly deepening with passion. She had been kissed before, awkward stolen moments with boys she had known in school, but nothing had prepared her for this. This was fire and safety all at once, desire tempered with tenderness. This was a kiss that promised everything. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Benjamin rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you properly. I want to do this right. We are already living on the same property. That is hardly proper by most standards," Zelda pointed out with a shaky laugh. "Then we will make our own standards. I want to take you to dances in town, have Sunday dinners together, take long rides just to talk. And when the time is right, when you are ready, I want to ask you to marry me." He pulled back to look into her eyes. "But only if that is what you want. I never want you to feel trapped or obligated." "I do not feel trapped," Zelda said. "I feel free for the first time in my life. Free to choose, free to love, free to dream about a future that is not just about survival." She kissed him again, softer this time, a promise rather than a passion. "Court me, Benjamin. Let us do this right." And so they did. Over the following weeks, Benjamin courted Zelda with a sweetness that made her heart ache. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows, wrote her clumsy but heartfelt poems, took her to Medicine Bow for the autumn dance where they scandalized half the town by dancing every dance together. Mrs. Chen became a willing conspirator, packing elaborate picnic lunches for their rides and always making sure to include something special. Tom and the ranch hands watched the courtship with approval, glad to see their boss happy. They started making excuses to need Zelda's advice just so they could see Benjamin's face light up when she walked into a room. The ranch prospered under their combined management, with Zelda's organizational skills complementing Benjamin's practical knowledge perfectly. In November, Benjamin took Zelda to meet his mother in Cheyenne. Mary Dalton was a small, fierce woman who reminded Zelda of a hawk, all sharp eyes and quick movements. She looked Zelda up and down critically when they arrived, then said, "So you are the woman who has my son smiling like a fool." "Mother," Benjamin said warningly. "It is fine," Zelda said, fighting a smile. "Yes, madam, I suppose I am. Good. He needs someone to make him smile. He has been too serious for too long." Mary hugged Zelda tightly. "Welcome to the family, dear. We are not engaged yet," Benjamin protested. Mary snorted. "Not officially, maybe, but I have eyes in my head. That boy is going to propose before Christmas or I will die of shock." She was right, although it happened even sooner than she predicted. On Thanksgiving Day, as Zelda stood in the kitchen of the main house helping Mrs. Chen prepare a feast for everyone on the ranch. Benjamin came in with something hidden behind his back. "Can I steal you for a moment?" he asked. "I am in the middle of making pies," Zelda protested, laughing. "The pies can wait," Mrs. Chen said, shooing them out. "Go, go." Benjamin led her outside to the porch, where the November air was crisp and cold. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a pearl set in the center. "Your mother's ring," Zelda gasped. "But how?" "I never gave it back to you that day in Thompson's shop. I kept it, thinking maybe someday I would have a reason to return it." He took the ring out of the box. "This ring belonged to your mother, and she wore it as a symbol of love and commitment. I cannot think of a better way to ask you to be my wife than with this ring that already means so much to you." Zelda was crying now, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Benjamin slipped the ring onto her left hand, and it fit perfectly, just as it had fit her mother and her grandmother before that. Then he kissed her, deep and long, while the sunset blazed around them and Mrs. Chen watched from the kitchen window with her hand pressed to her heart. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Medicine Bow, with Mrs. Chen and Tom standing up with them and half the town crowding into the pews. Benjamin wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortable but devastatingly handsome, and Zelda wore a dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew from ivory silk, simple but elegant. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Benjamin kissed her with such enthusiasm that the congregation burst into laughter and applause. The wedding supper was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn decorated with pine boughs and candles. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Zelda danced with Benjamin, with Tom, with ranch hands and townspeople, and even with old Mr. Thompson, who had the grace to look ashamed when he congratulated her. "I should not have tried to cheat you that day," he said gruffly. "You deserved better." "Yes, I did," Zelda agreed. "But if you had been honest, I might never have met Benjamin, so in a strange way I suppose I should thank you." Thompson laughed. "You are gracious, Mrs. Dalton. Mrs. Dalton." She was Mrs. Dalton now, Zelda Dalton. She tried the name out in her mind and found she loved it, loved being joined to this good man who had saved her, and then fallen in love with her. That night, in the main house that was now their home together, Benjamin carried her over the threshold with careful reverence. He had given her the cabin to use as an office, and they had spent the past week moving her belongings into the main house, merging their lives into a single shared space. "Happy, Mrs. Dalton?" Benjamin asked, setting her down gently. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Zelda said, reaching up to kiss him. "I love you, Benjamin. I love you too, more than words can say." They loved each other tenderly that night, learning each other's bodies with patience and care. Benjamin was gentle, always making sure she was comfortable, always putting her pleasure before his own. And Zelda discovered that she was not afraid, that with this man she trusted completely. Intimacy was not something to fear, but something beautiful to share. The years that followed were full and happy. Zelda continued to manage the ranch accounts, and under her guidance, the Double D prospered and grew. Benjamin expanded the herd, added a second barn, and gained a reputation as one of the most successful ranchers in Wyoming. They were partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together, supporting each other through the inevitable challenges of ranch life. In the spring of 1885, Zelda gave birth to a son they named Henry, after Benjamin's father. He was a robust baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's curious eyes. Benjamin was a devoted father, taking the baby with him on rides around the property in a specially designed carrier, teaching him about cattle and horses before he could even walk. "You are going to turn him into a ranch hand before he is out of diapers," Zelda teased. "Nothing wrong with that," Benjamin said, cuddling the baby against his chest. "Besides, he loves it. Look how happy he is." It was true. Henry cooed and gurgled contentedly whenever his father held him, clearly bonding with the big man who handled him with such gentle care. 2 years later, Zelda had twin girls they named Rose and Ruby. They were identical except for their temperaments. Rose was calm and thoughtful, while Ruby was a whirlwind of energy and mischief. Benjamin was utterly enchanted by his daughters, letting them climb all over him and play with his hair and wrap him completely around their tiny fingers. "You are spoiling them," Zelda said, watching him let the twins smear mashed potatoes all over his shirt at dinner. "I am loving them," Benjamin corrected. "There is a difference." The ranch house filled with laughter and noise, with children's toys scattered across the floors and muddy handprints on the walls. Mrs. Chen, who had cried happy tears when each baby was born, helped care for the children and taught them Chinese phrases along with English. Tom became Uncle Tom, always ready with a horsey ride on his shoulders or a story about the old days before Mama came to the ranch. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, Zelda and Benjamin would sit on the porch together, holding hands and watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "You ever think about that day?" Zelda asked one evening. "The day you walked into Thompson's shop?" "All the time," Benjamin said. "I think about how close I came to not going in. I had my supplies on order at the mercantile, but something made me stop at Thompson's first. Call it fate, call it luck, call it God's will, I do not know, but I am grateful for it every single day." "So am I." Zelda leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so desperate that day, so scared and alone, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had been too proud to say out loud." "You were never alone," Benjamin said softly. "You just did not know it yet. I know it now." She turned to kiss him. "I love you, Benjamin, more every day, and I love you. You are my heart, Zelda, my home." As the years passed, the children grew strong and healthy. Henry followed his father around the ranch, learning everything about cattle and horses and land management. Rose developed a love of books and numbers just like her mother, often helping with the accounts even as a young girl. Ruby turned out to have a gift with animals, able to calm even the most skittish horse with her touch and gentle voice. In 1892, Zelda gave birth to another son, James, who had his mother's dark eyes and quick mind. And in 1895, their last child arrived, a daughter named Grace who completed their family. The Double D Ranch became known throughout Wyoming not just for its quality cattle, but for the family who ran it. Zelda became involved in efforts to bring better education to the region, eventually helping to establish a proper school in medicine, where all children, boys and girls alike, could receive a quality education. She never became a formal teacher, but she tutored students who needed extra help and donated books to the school library. Benjamin served on local committees, helping to improve roads and water access for ranchers throughout the territory. He gained a reputation for fairness and integrity, settling disputes and offering guidance to younger ranchers just starting out. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Benjamin gave Zelda a locket with pictures of all their children inside. "I wanted you to have something that showed the family we have built together," he said. "It is perfect," Zelda said, fastening it around her neck. "But you know, the best gift you ever gave me was not a thing at all." "What was it?" "Hope. That day in Thompson's shop, you gave me hope when I had none left. You showed me that there were still good people in the world, that my life was worth saving, that I deserved kindness and respect and love." She took his face in her hands. "Everything we have built, everything we have become, it all started with that gift." "No," Benjamin said gently. "It started with you being strong enough to walk into that shop and try to save yourself. You did not wait to be rescued. You took action, even though it broke your heart to sell that ring. That strength, that courage, that is what I fell in love with." They kissed then, with the sweetness of long familiarity and the passion that had never faded between them. Years turned into decades. The children grew up and made their own ways in the world. Henry took over the ranch management, allowing Benjamin and Zelda to take a step back and enjoy a slower pace of life. Rose became a teacher, opening a school for girls in Cheyenne that fulfilled the dream Zelda had once thought lost forever. Ruby married a veterinarian and helped bring modern animal medicine to Wyoming ranches. James became a lawyer, fighting for fair treatment of workers and small ranchers. And Grace, the baby, turned out to be a talented writer whose stories about Wyoming life were published in magazines across the country. In 1920, as Benjamin and Zelda sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Zelda turned to her husband of nearly 35 years. His hair was white now, his face more lined, but his eyes still held the same kindness that had first drawn her to him. "We have had a good life," she said. "The best life," Benjamin agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible. Do you have any regrets?" "Only one." When she looked at him in surprise, he smiled. "I regret that I did not walk into Thompson's shop an hour earlier. I would have liked an extra hour with you." Zelda laughed, the sound bright and young despite her years. "You are ridiculous. I am in love. It amounts to the same thing." He pulled her close. "Thank you, Zelda, for saying yes all those years ago, for building this life with me, for being my partner and my love and my best friend. Thank you," she said, "for seeing me when I felt invisible, for giving me back my mother's ring and with it my dignity. For showing me that strength is not about facing everything alone, but about having the courage to accept help and give help in return." They sat together as the sun set, surrounded by the laughter of grandchildren and the golden light of a Wyoming evening. The ring on Zelda's finger, her mother's ring that had once represented her lowest moment, now symbolized everything beautiful that had grown from that day of desperation. It had come full circle, from her grandmother to her mother to her, and one day it would pass to her own daughter or granddaughter, carrying with it a story of hope and love and second chances. In the distance, the cattle lowed in their evening contentment. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and strong, a testament to hard work and partnership. And in the main house, lights were beginning to glow as family gathered for supper, just as they had every night for decades. Benjamin Dalton had walked into a pawn shop in 1883 and bought back a ring for a desperate woman. But what he had really bought, what he had really given, was a future. And that future had bloomed into something neither of them could have imagined, something worth more than all the gold in Wyoming. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast sky above, Zelda leaned against her husband's shoulder and thought about how a single act of kindness could change everything. How one moment of compassion could ripple outward, creating waves that touched lives not yet born. How love, when given freely and honestly, could transform despair into joy and loneliness into belonging. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you," Benjamin replied. And under the Wyoming stars, surrounded by the life they had built together, Benjamin and Zelda Dalton held each other close and gave thanks for the day their paths had crossed, for the ring that had brought them together, and for all the years of love that had followed.